Wyoming Territory, January 1887. Quinn Fletcher had not seen a soul in 8 days. The sky was a hard white sheet above the Bighorn Mountains, and the snow kept falling, silent and endless. The world had turned to ice and hush, and Quinn liked it that way. He had built his shack deep into the treeline, half a day's ride from the nearest rail stop, and even further from the town of Sheridan. He kept to himself. That was the point. But everything changed the moment he opened the door that morning and saw her collapse into the snow. She came stumbling out of the trees in a thick coat too thin for the cold, boots barely holding together, her cheeks raw and red. She looked up once, just once, and her knees gave out. Her body crumpled like paper into the white. Quinn ran. He grabbed her under the arms and hauled her up, cradling her head against his chest. She was freezing. Her skin was wet with snow, her breath shallow and fast. He kicked the door open wider and carried her inside without a second thought. The fire was low, but it was enough. He laid her on the cot, stripped off her soaked gloves, and wrapped her hands in a wool blanket. Her lips were blue. Her lashes were iced. But her heartbeat was there, fluttering fast against her throat. He stoked the fire higher. She woke up 2 hours later, her eyes opened slow and cautious like someone used to waking into trouble. They were green, deep green, and full of confusion. She flinched when she saw him. "You are all right," Quinn said, keeping his voice low. She blinked hard. "Where?" "My shack. You came out of the trees and collapsed. You are safe now." She sat up fast, then winced and clutched her side. "Easy," he said, moving closer. "You were hurt." "No. Just cold. Dizzy." She looked around, taking in the single-room shack, the fire, the pot of water warming on the stove. "I thought I was going to die out there." "You almost did." He paused. "What is your name?" "Faye. Faye Kensington." He nodded once. "Quinn Fletcher." She stared at him for a moment, and then barely but real she smiled. It hit him like a shot to the ribs. That smile, fragile and tired and bright through the cold, did something to him. He had not seen something that warm in a long time, maybe ever. "You found me," she said, her voice softer now. "Thank you." He cleared his throat and stood up. "You need food and dry clothes." There was not much in the shack, but he had a clean shirt and old trousers that would do. She changed behind the curtain while he stirred stew on the stove. When she stepped out, the clothes hung loose on her, but her face looked warmer, her skin less pale. She ate slow, careful. Quinn sat across from her, watching. "Where were you heading?" he asked when she finished. "Nowhere," she said, then looked down. "I do not know anymore. I was heading to Montana. Then the snow hit harder. I lost the road. My horse spooked and ran. I walked for 2 days before I saw smoke from your chimney." He frowned. "Montana is a long way off. You should not have been traveling alone." Faye's jaw tightened. "I did not have a choice." He waited. "My father died last year," she said, voice low. "Left me nothing but debts. I was working in a boarding house in Cheyenne until the owner's son got too bold. When I pushed him off, they fired me. I heard of a job up north. Figured I could make it before the worst of winter set in." She looked away again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong." Quinn stayed quiet. He did not offer pity. She did not need that. "You can stay here," he said instead, "until the snow clears. It is safer than trying the road again." Faye met his eyes. "You do not even know me. I know enough. You did not give up. That matters." She stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her gaze. Then she nodded. That night, she curled up on the cot while he took the floor by the fire. The snow kept falling outside. The wind howled. But inside, the silence was different. Not empty. Just shared. Days passed. Faye helped where she could. She chopped kindling when her strength came back, stirred stew, mended torn shirts with quick, neat stitches. She sang sometimes under her breath, soft and low, while folding blankets. Quinn found himself listening more than he should. He caught himself watching her too much. The way she brushed her hair back, how she closed her eyes when she sipped something warm, the way her mouth twitched when she was trying not to laugh. "I am not used to quiet like this," she said one morning watching the snow fall outside. "You do not like it?" "No. I do." Her voice was soft. "It is just different. Everything has always been loud. People, streets, trouble." He looked at her. "Maybe different is what you need." She met his eyes. "Maybe it is." That night, she sat beside him by the fire. "You were not what I expected," she said, arms wrapped around her knees. "Expected what?" "I do not know. A trap? A drunk? Someone who would see me as something to take." Quinn's jaw tightened. "I would never." "I know that now," she said quietly. "You carried me in. You found me." He looked at her, saw the firelight on her skin, the way her eyes found his and held. His chest tightened. "You smiled," he said. "What?" "That first day. When you woke up. You smiled." Faye's lips curved again, slow and warm. "I remember." He did not touch her. Not yet. But he wanted to. Instead, he said, "You are safe here, Faye. As long as you need." She looked at him for a long time. "Maybe I do not want to leave." He swallowed, heart thudding. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside, something else was starting quiet, sure, and just as real. And neither of them wanted to stop it. The wind shifted near the end of January. It no longer screamed through the trees, just whispered, brushing frost off the pine branches and leaving the air sharp with the scent of thaw. Faye opened the door one morning and stood there longer than usual. Her shoulders lifted with a breath that didn't catch in her chest like it had each day before. Quinn noticed from where he sat mending a leather strap near the stove. He didn't speak, just watched her. She stepped back inside and shut the door gently. "There are birds again," she said. He nodded, threading the needle without looking up. "Spring's not far." She looked down at her hands, fingers still red from the cold. "Will you go into town soon?" "Likely," he said. "Once the trail clears. Need salt? Flour? Maybe kerosene." She pulled her shawl tighter, though the fire was strong. "I should find work again. Somewhere I can earn my place." "You've been earning it." "That's not the same." She met his gaze. "I don't want to be a burden." Quinn set the leather down. "You're not." She didn't answer right away. Then, after a moment, "I know what happens when people get tired of carrying others." He leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "That's not who I am. I'm still learning who you are." Her voice wasn't defensive, just true. He stood and crossed to the shelf near the stove, pulling down a tin of coffee. "You'll learn. If you want to." Faye watched him measure the grounds into the pot. "You always been out here alone?" He didn't look at her when he answered. "Not always." She waited. "My brother used to trap with me. Until 2 winters back." "What happened?" "Fell through river ice. I pulled him out, but it was too long. The fever came fast." Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. Quinn poured water into the pot carefully. "He was younger. Laughed more than I did. Talked too much." Faye stepped closer, but not too close. "You miss him?" "Every day." The silence stretched, not heavy, just honest. Then she said, "You're not what I expected either." He turned. "What did you expect?" "Someone who looked away when things got hard." Quinn met her eyes. "I've seen too much to look away anymore." The wind rattled the window pane once, then faded. She watched him for a long moment, then stepped to the table and picked up the mending he'd left. Her needle moved steady, practiced. "You don't ask many questions," she said. "Don't need to." "Why not?" "You talk when you're ready. I listen." She gave a soft laugh, low and unguarded. "That's rare." He watched her hands as she worked. "You sew like you've done it 1,000 times." "I have. My mother ran a dry goods store in Denver. Taught me how to fix what we couldn't replace." He nodded once. "She's still there." Faye paused, then shook her head. "She passed when I was 17. Fever too." They didn't speak for a while after that. Just the pop of the fire, the sound of thread pulling through cloth. That night, As the wind died down and the sky turned pale with starlight, Faye stood outside under the eaves. Quinn joined her, pulling his coat close. Her breath clouded the air in front of her, slow and even. "There's a quiet here," she said. "That doesn't feel empty." Quinn looked out across the dark trees. "It isn't. Not with someone else in it." She turned her face toward him. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again." He didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "You are. As long as you're here." She didn't move. Neither did he. But the space between them had changed. Not closed, not yet. But something had shifted, like the snow loosening on the roof before it falls. Inside, the firelight flickered against the walls. Outside, the stars held steady, and neither of them stepped away. By the first week of February, the snow had hardened to crust. The trees stood bare and black against the pale sky, and the creek beyond the ridge cracked and ran thin beneath the ice. Each morning, Quinn stepped outside to check the traps and scan the ridgeline. Faye came with him now, wrapped in his old wool coat, her breath steady in the cold. One morning she pointed to a wide set of prints frozen into the snow near the edge of the timberline. "Elk?" "Too wide," Quinn said, crouching beside them. "Moose, maybe. Big one. Passed through yesterday." She watched him as he traced the edge of the track with a gloved hand. "You read these like sentences." He stood slowly. "They tell you what happened when no one was watching." They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching through the crusted layer. When they reached the broken fence line where the ridge curved down toward the north bluff, Faye stopped and looked out across the hollow. "I think I remember this place from the trail," she said, shading her eyes. "Just before I lost the road. I camped near that rise." Quinn followed her gaze. "You were close. Less than a mile from here." She exhaled through her nose. "I must have passed it in the dark." They turned back, her steps slower now, more thoughtful. The wind had softened, carrying a faint scent of damp wood and sap. Spring still far off but stirring. That evening, she sat near the stove, turning a carved slat of wood in her hands. "Did you make this?" Quinn glanced up from the boot he was oiling. "Out of pine. Was going to be part of a drawer." "It's smooth," she said, running her fingers along the grain. "You've got a careful touch." He nodded once. "Built this place with my hands. No one else was going to do it." Faye set the wood down. "You ever think about leaving it?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not often. There's peace here. I know how to live in it." She folded her arms over her knees. "I keep thinking about the last town I passed. There was a girl there couldn't have been more than 16 working in the saloon like someone twice her age. She gave me a blanket for the road. Said she had more than she needed." Quinn's brow lowered. "Not many would have done that. I think she saw something in me. Something she recognized." Faye looked toward the flame inside the stove. "That kind of kindness, it stays with you. She'll remember you too," he said. "People don't forget those they give to." She didn't speak again for a while, just listened to the creak of the stovepipe and the steady rustle of wind against the walls. Later that night, as they played a quiet game of checkers by lantern light, she reached across the board and moved a piece with more deliberation than usual. "You said your brother talked too much," she said. "What did he say about me?" Quinn looked up slowly. "He never met you." She tilted her head slightly. "If he had, he'd have said you were sharp, that you were stronger than you looked." She leaned back. "You think I'm strong? I've seen what you carry," he said. "You didn't break under it." She studied him for a moment, her eyes catching the lamplight. "You don't talk much either, but when you do, it means something." He didn't answer, just moved his last piece and took her corner square. She laughed once, low and surprised. "You've been letting me win." "I never said that." "No, but you did." The next morning, she was already outside when he woke, standing near the edge of the woods with her hands in her pockets. The sky behind her was streaked with pale gold, the sun just beginning to rise. He stepped out onto the porch. "You usually sleep later." "I couldn't," she said, turning toward him. It's warmer. The air smells different. It's changing. She nodded. I think I am too. They stood that way for a while, not moving, not speaking. Just breathing the same air, watching the same sky. She turned to him after a long moment. If I stayed past spring, what would that mean to you? His throat worked before he answered. It'd mean I don't have to look for someone I already found. She stepped toward him, slow and sure. I'd like to stay. Not just because I'm tired of running, but because this place feels like something I never thought I'd find. He didn't touch her. Just looked into her face, saw the steadiness there, the quiet decision already made. You'd be welcome, he said. Their breath met in the space between them. The sun crested the ridge and the world turned gold around them. Neither moved. They didn't have to. The truth was already between them, solid and quiet and real. Faye paused in the doorway, holding the dry cloth she'd been using to polish the lantern glass. Her gaze lingered on Quinn, bent over the bench outside, shaping a new handle for the draw knife. The morning was mild enough that the snow had begun to soften near the base of the pines, and the faint drip of meltwater tapped rhythmically from the edge of the roof. You build things quiet, she said, stepping out. Quinn straightened, brushing with dust from his hands. Tools don't argue back. She smiled, but it faded sooner than it would have days ago. I keep thinking about the letter I didn't send. He looked up. To who? My cousin in Helena. She offered me a place before I ever left Cheyenne. Faye folded the cloth in her hands. I never answered. I told myself it was pride, but I think I didn't want her to see what I'd become. Quinn set the blade down. You don't owe anyone that version of you. I don't know which version is even true anymore. He stepped down from the bench, wiping his palms on his trousers. Maybe you're still building her. She looked past him, toward the thin line of smoke rising from the deadwood he'd burned earlier. She wouldn't recognize herself here, I think. Quinn followed her gaze. That might be the best thing. Faye turned back to him. Do you ever wonder what kind of life you missed by staying out here? He shook his head slowly. I've wondered what kind of man I'd be if I hadn't. They stood a long while without speaking. A jay scolded from the trees. Somewhere far off, a tree branch cracked under its own weight and fell. I used to think safety was something you earned, she said finally. Like if you worked hard enough, or kept your head down long enough, it'd show up. Quinn's voice was low. Sometimes safety doesn't come until you stop chasing it. She stepped toward him, close enough that the scent of cedar oil from his hands reached her. You never asked me to explain myself. Not once. You came through the door, he said. That was enough. Her hand brushed his sleeve, not accidental. I'm not the same girl who stumbled out of the trees. I know, he said. You're still here. That night, the kettle rattled once before the boil. Faye stirred the cornmeal slowly, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, the firelight catching on the curve of her jaw. Quinn watched her from the table, his arms folded, his body still but alert. I used to dream about boarding a train west, she said. Not to get somewhere, but just to ride until there was nothing left but land. He leaned forward slightly. Why? Because I thought if I could leave everything behind, I'd stop feeling like I was always bracing for something. She set the spoon down and turned. I don't brace anymore. He stood, walked over, and stood beside her at the stove. You don't have to. You didn't ask me to stay, she said. I didn't want to push you into something you weren't choosing. I'm choosing now. He turned to face her fully. Then I'll ask. She looked at him, steady and sure. Go on. Stay. Not until spring. Not until the trail clears. Stay like you belong here. Her chin lifted slightly. I'd like to. They stood close, just the soft crackle of the fire between them. Outside, the moon rose over the ridge, silvering the hills and casting long, still shadows across the snow. Inside, neither moved to break the moment. Faye reached for his hand slowly, and he met her halfway. Their fingers laced without hesitation. No more waiting. No more asking. It was already done. The thaw came slow, peeling winter back in damp layers. In the low pasture where the scrub grew thick, the ground turned to mud, and Quinn set boards across the worst of it to keep the mules from sinking. Faye carried buckets from the creek swelled with meltwater, her boots caked and her sleeves rolled high. They worked side by side, wordless more often than not, the rhythm between them quiet and steady. Snow still clung to the north slope, but the air smelled of wet pine and turned to earth. One morning, Faye leaned against the fence rail watching a hawk glide low over the ridge. "I never thought I'd grow fond of silence," she said. Quinn tightened a rope on the gate and glanced toward her. "It's not silence. Just a different kind of talking." She nodded once. "That makes sense now." Later, over a supper of beans and cornbread, she set down her fork and tilted her head. "I want to build something here." Quinn looked up. "What kind of something?" "More than a roof over our heads. A place that holds things. Memories. Meals. Maybe people." She met his eyes. "I've never had that." He leaned back, considering. "We could add to the cabin. A second room. A root cellar. Maybe a proper porch." "I want to plant too," she said. "Not just wild greens. Something we tend together." He nodded. "There's good soil near the edge of the grove. South-facing, gets early light." She smiled, small but sure. "Then we'll start there." Quinn set his fork aside. "You mean to stay then?" "I meant it the day I said it." Her voice was soft, but firm. "I've had enough of leaving. Enough of being someone people forget after they close a door." He reached across the table, palm open, and she fit her hand into his without hesitation. By mid-March, the snow had melted down to patches in the shaded places. Quinn felled a dead pine near the stream and sawed it clean, while Faye shoveled beds for planting. They worked without needing to discuss it. He shaped, she cleared. When her hands blistered, he wrapped them in linen. When his shoulder stiffened, she rubbed it with goose grease by firelight. One evening, she unwrapped an old bundle she'd kept at the bottom of her satchel. Inside were 2 stitched squares of muslin, both embroidered in pale thread. "My mother's," she said. "She made these before she passed. I found them again in Cheyenne but never had a place to hang them." Quinn held one up, the stitching delicate but strong. "What do the words mean?" "Let the quiet carry you home," she read aloud. "She used to say that when I couldn't sleep." Quinn looked at her long, then at the empty space above the hearth. "They should hang here." She nodded. "This is the first place that's felt like home." That night, after the lantern was doused and the fire burned low, Faye lay with her head on his chest, listening to the slow, steady thrum of his heart. "Do you ever think about what kind of father you'd be?" she asked in the dark. Quinn's hand moved gently against her back. "Sometimes. Never thought I'd get the chance. I think you'd be quiet with your love, but steady, like stone warmed in the sun." He didn't speak for a long time. Then, "You think you could love a life that simple?" "I already do." By the end of April, the ground was dry enough to build. They added a second room, walls of split logs chinked with moss and clay, a roof of hand-cut shingles. She stitched curtains from burlap, dyed with boiled walnut husks. He carved a cradle from cedar, though neither of them spoke of it aloud. One morning, she stood beside him barefoot in the dew, her hand resting low over her middle. He looked down, then at her, and she nodded. "It's early," she said, "but I know." He touched her cheek, rough fingers against soft skin. "We'll make space. We already are." They married beneath a cottonwood, the only witness a mule chewing grass nearby and the creek murmuring over stone. She wore a dress she'd pieced from spare cloth, and he wrapped her hand in both of his when he spoke his vow. "No matter what comes, I won't turn from you," he said. "This place is ours now. This life. I've walked a long road to find you," she answered, "but I'd walk it again." He kissed her gently, his forehead resting against hers long after. They stood that way until the light shifted and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of wild sage and wood smoke. The years passed in slow, deliberate seasons. They built a small coop, traded pelts for seed, raised a milk cow that Faye named Alma. When their daughter came, she was born in the room they'd built together, her first cry strong and clear in the stillness. Quinn held her close, his hands trembling for the first time in a long while. They named her Clara after Faye's mother. She grew up between pine and pasture, learning the names of plants from her mother and how to mark tracks from her father. She laughed often, loud and unafraid. They taught her to listen to the wind, to trust the land, and to know her worth. Faye hung the muslin squares over the child's bed. "Let the quiet carry you home," one read. The other simply said, "You belong." Quinn and Faye grew older without growing apart. Their days were full of small work and shared glances, of hands brushing in the garden, of stories told soft at dusk. They never spoke of the life they didn't have, only the one they built day by day with care. And when the wind came through the trees each spring, it brought not cold but memory, of a woman who had not turned back, of a man who had not looked away, of a fire that had never gone out. They lived in the stillness and in the strength of all that had come before. Together, always.